Hello, Divorce and Beyond family. I've got some exciting news because we have teamed up with Headspace to guide you toward better mental health. With Headspace's meditation, mindfulness tools, and mental health support, you're set for a journey to a happier, healthier you. And there's more because if you sign up through our exclusive link, you'll enjoy 2 weeks of Headspace membership for free. So don't miss out on this opportunity to embrace your well-being. You can check out the show notes for the link or just go to divorcebeyond.com/headspace-Susan. And you'll be able to start your path to peace and joy today. This is just one more way that we can support you on your journey to a better beyond.
Coming up on today's episode of the Divorce and Beyond podcast.
Discovery process can feel like the most tedious, frustrating, and honestly really invasive part of your divorce. But here is the truth that I want you to know. It's an important, in fact, integral part of getting you ready to negotiate a successful settlement. And you know, I think a successful settlement is one that works for you. Hello, and welcome to the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host. As a top divorce attorney and family law mediator for 30 years, I know what you need to know to get through your divorce, and most importantly, how to move beyond it to thrive and transition to your new future. My experts and I are here to give you the insider view into the process, so listen in for the wisdom and expert information you need on your journey through divorce and beyond. Welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host and listeners. So I did that Susan-only episode on my top insider tips, and you really seem to like that. In fact, you've been reaching out and asking for more, so I've decided to do a few more Susan-only episodes. The topics that you've been asking for are some of the basics of family law and divorce, things that you want someone to explain to you, hopefully in an accessible way. So today I'm going to dive into a topic that I look through the 300 plus episodes that I have, and I have not done one specifically on the discovery process. And I know I can hear you all out there groaning, ooh, discovery. And I get that. That makes complete sense because the discovery process can feel like the most tedious, frustrating, and honestly really invasive part of your divorce. But here is the truth that I want you to know. It's an important, in fact, integral part of getting you ready to negotiate a successful settlement. And you know, I think a successful settlement is one that works for you. I'm going to tell you a little analogy I've used with all of my clients over the years to help them understand the importance of the discovery process and where it falls in the divorce continuum, the timeline of divorce. It falls in early on in the process. And I've always used the pie analogy, as I call it, because I consider your settlement, your divorce settlement, to be a division up, a cutting up and taking slices and pieces of your pie, of your marital pie, and putting them on your plate or your spouse's plate. And here's the issue. What most often happens for divorce attorneys, mediators, whatever path you're using to work on your divorce agreement, you come in very often as a client and you and your spouse have already had discussions about slicing up some of that pie. And in fact, in many cases, you've already taken pieces and put them on someone's plate. That may or may not work. Most often, that does not work, especially if one of you has already started eating that slice of pie, and I'll explain more. If you start slicing your pie and dividing it up before you know how big your pie is, what's missing from your pie, what fruits are in your pie, what type of pie you like versus what type of pie your spouse likes, what pie pieces your children need, without having that all in place and having a general understanding of what the pie is, you only harm yourselves and create difficult situations by starting to slice it up early, because you may slice something and give it to one party that actually, upon reflection and further understanding of your situation, needs in whole or part to go to the other party. And now you've created what feels like a reneging situation. Well, you said I could have the piece of pie with the house, and now you're saying I can't. And it may be for very good reasons. Maybe the two of you hadn't realized that the mortgage can't be refinanced, or interest rates are so out of this world that it's not financially feasible to refinance. There's a lot of reasons that you may need to take into consideration as part of your marital pie before you slice up that house and give it to one or the other parties. And in fact, that is the most common thing we see when you walk through the door as professionals. You have already decided what's going to happen with the house. And since that is usually one of the biggest assets, as well as one of the biggest debts of your marriage, of your relationship, often that is one of the last things that you can actually divide. Taking all of that and pulling it together, what you need to do is take the time to pull together what that pie consists of. And it's not just you knowing what's in the pie, it's your spouse knowing what's in the pie too. And the two of you having a general understanding and agreement about what is in the pie for you to be able to then start dividing it up. And let me give you another example on why I say you have to have a general agreement on what's in the pie. Here's another example from my practice. And I'll go use the marital residence again, because again, that is one of the biggest assets we're usually dealing with and one of the biggest bones of contention. So we had a divorce case where the parties actually had a few residences, a few separate residences. One was living in one and the other was living in the other. And the residence that one of the parties was in, that party wanted to retain it, and they went out and got an appraisal that said that property was worth about $1.2 million, which sounds like a great number, right? And so she wanted to keep that asset, and then my client was going to be able to keep an asset of equal value, and that was how she proposed to handle it. The problem was my client went out and got an appraisal, and it came out to be $2.2 million, $1 million swing between the two. He was certain his was correct, and she was certain that hers was correct. You could not begin to negotiate what was going to happen with that property because, frankly, the swing was too big. We did not have an agreement and understanding as to what the value of that property actually was. And in fact, both parties had an appraisal, had a third-party appraisal that backed up their valuations. Very complicated case. It was a unique property, and one of the appraisers felt that gave it more value. One felt it actually hurt the value, that it was unique. But those are just examples as to why the discovery process is so important to the overall divorce process, and really importantly, to your final conclusion of that divorce process, which is your settlement. So today I'm going to break it down for you in simple terms, what discovery is, why it matters, what to expect, and how to prepare. I'm also going to touch on some of the complex issues that can arise in high asset cases and the professionals you may need to bring in to help along the way. By the end of this episode, I want you to have a better understanding of how to navigate discovery and why it's one of the most powerful tools, but also can be one of the biggest stumbling blocks in your divorce. Let's get started. Let's start with the actual discovery process. Let's start with the basics. What exactly is discovery? You'll hear your attorney saying it all the time, you'll hear it and see it in everything you read about this process. What the heck is it actually? Well, simply put, discovery is the fact-finding phase of your divorce. It's a process where both you and your spouse are going to exchange both key financial and personal information. Everybody knows about the financial aspect of it, but it also includes sharing personal information if it's relevant to your case. And the goal of discovery is to ensure complete transparency so that the court, if you're going to trial or the court's making decisions, or more likely, the two of you, when you're negotiating, can make informed decisions about how to divide your assets, how to determine support, and how to address all your other financial matters and perhaps some of your personal matters, things around parenting. So think of it like a financial x-ray of your marriage. It's there to show everything that needs to be visible. And that's the key sort of component there, needs to be visible. Because not everything needs to be visible, but if it's relevant to the marriage and the division of your assets and perhaps the care and custody of your children, then it's part of the x-ray. It needs to be visible. In an ideal case, both spouses are upfront and cooperative in the discovery process. And in fact, this is expected in a mediation process, and it's part of the collaborative agreement in a collaborative divorce that people are going to, by agreement, cooperatively share all relevant information. In a litigated case, that's hardly how it moves. And in fact, the process does not move particularly smoothly in litigated cases. In many divorces, the discovery process becomes a battle, becomes a time waster, a money waster, and a conflict raiser, I'll call it, right? It raises the conflict because every time you have to force the other side, file a motion, or do something to force the other person to give you information they should be giving you, but they feel they don't need to or don't want to, that raises the level of conflict. And when you have more conflict, you have more time in court, you have more attorney time, and you have more expense, and everything takes longer. So if one of you, and this is the most common complaint in the discovery process, is that someone's trying to hide assets or downplay their income, or they're just delaying handing over documents. This is extremely common, especially the more conflict that there is. And it's also the number one reason why discovery gets bogged down. And that's why the discovery process is so important, because it's there to ensure that no one gets away with dishonesty. It's meant to level the playing field so that everyone has the information that they need. So let's break it down. Let me just first touch on mediation and collaborative divorce. In those cases, there will be a meeting and the expected materials to be exchanged will be reviewed, and both parties will provide them. And if there is an issue around something, someone says, well, I don't think I need to give that, it's going to be discussed cooperatively and collaboratively. Usually that can be resolved as a part of that process. If you are in a more traditional litigation approach type of divorce, if you have a high conflict divorce, if you have just a complete lack of trust, which, face it, is pretty common when you get to the point of divorce, usually something has happened to erode the trust of the parties. So you get to a situation where you're asking for information from your spouse, and it's either slow coming, or they only give you parts of it, or they tell you they don't think they need to give you that bank account because it's got their mom's name on that bank account, or whatever it is. But it starts the battle of trying to pry loose this information. So for litigated cases, for cases where you are proceeding in a more traditional attorney-represented approach, there are a variety of tools that attorneys can use to get discovery materials. The first one I want to talk about are called interrogatories. Interrogatories are simply written questions that the other party is to answer under oath, meaning you can ask them questions and they will answer those, and then they will swear at the bottom that the information they have provided is true and accurate to the best of their knowledge and belief. Now, I say that as if it were simple. First of all, you have to know the right questions to ask. And I'll tell you, most attorneys who've been practicing for any length of time have standard interrogatories that they ask, the general information we would ask anyone. And in fact, many jurisdictions have standard interrogatories that have been made a part of practice. But you can also ask specific questions if you know what to ask about. So you can ask further questions or deeper questions about business endeavors or things that you may know or suspect that your spouse has done with money or with the children or in other ways. If it's relevant to the divorce, you can ask them to answer these written questions under oath. These are usually sent to the other attorney who then sits with their client to go through them, and then they're returned. One thing to know, anytime you file something against your spouse, expect that they're going to turn around and file the same thing to you. So if they haven't filed interrogatories, but you do, get ready, because those interrogatories are coming right back at you. But the questions that people ask generally in here are, what's your current income? How is it made up? Do you get bonuses? Things like that, things that you may not know. List all of your bank accounts, investments, and real estate holdings, right? Getting a full statement of finances. Do you own any businesses or have an interest in any businesses? Have you given any large gifts or transferred money in the last few years? Right? People sometimes do sneaky things when they're getting ready for a divorce, or they may have forgotten about something. So you need to go look into this. But there's a whole host of questions that you can ask in these interrogatories. These interrogatories, their answers must be truthful again, because they are sworn statements, meaning if people lie, they could face legal consequences to those lies. You have to prove they lied, but then you can ask for sanctions. You can ask the court to infer that the question is the inverse and that they infer the answer against the other party. Depends on what it is, something that your attorney will take care of for you if it comes to it. There's another tip here if you are served with interrogatories. Take your time in answering them. What usually will happen is your attorney is going to send them to you and tell you to sit down, or on your computer or however you're going to do it, sit down and answer them as accurately and correctly as possible. You usually want to give accurate information without giving unnecessary details. Just answer the question that has been asked. And then you will give those responses back to your attorney, who's going to review them with you. Often they may object to some of the questions if they feel they go beyond the scope or are unclear, or a variety of other things that may allow objection. But they will also help you craft your responses to ensure that they're accurate and review them with you before you sign them. Okay? So that is a very powerful tool. It's probably the one that's used least often. The one that's used most often is called a request for production of documents. And that's the paper trail. And that's the one everyone hates. And God knows I don't blame you. It is awful because you have to sit down and pull together all of your financial and perhaps other types of documents, everything related to your financial life And that can be a lot depending on what your finances are. Also, it may ask for documents with respect to your children or other aspects of your life, depending. But typical document requests are things like bank statements for the last 3 years for all accounts, credit card statements for all credit cards for the last 3 years, 5 years. Depends on the jurisdiction. Some jurisdictions have a certain time frame that is standard, and you can go beyond that if there's good reason. Others, it's really up to your attorneys, and it may be different in every case. Some people may have reason to want to go back further. Something may have happened. Something may have changed because of something in the past. Someone got sick, and so their income changed 4 years ago. Well, you may want to go back to 5 years ago. Depends, right? So you have to look at it. It's going to want your tax returns, usually the last 3 to 5 years. All tax returns with the documents, supporting documents that go with it, 1099s, W-2s, all that fun stuff. Your pay stubs, your mortgage statements, your investment account records, your retirement account records, your pension paperwork, your life insurance paperwork. I could go on. And again, just like with the interrogatories, many jurisdictions have a standard set of requests for production, and then parties are allowed to, at times, request things beyond that. Sometimes there's more than one round of these requests going out too, right? You might do a round of interrogatories, get those answers, and it raises more questions. So you might do a second round of interrogatories. Same with the request for production. In the request for production, people these days are also looking for business financials. I mentioned retirement account statements, but we're starting to see things like we want your Venmo or your PayPal transactions. People no longer use cash. I want to know what you've been doing with your Apple Pay. Whatever it may be, they want to look at everything. The attorneys are going to go through things with a fine-tooth comb, or the financial professionals, and I'll talk more about them in a minute. But this is important because your financial settlement and the negotiation of that depends on having the full financial picture. And if your spouse is claiming they don't have the money for support, but they've been depositing large amounts into private investment accounts, Discovery is going to find that if they've been ferreting money away, or money has a paper trail. I've always told clients that it is actually hard to hide money. It can be done, but it is hard to do. Your average person does not have the wherewithal to do that. And it's easy to see the trail. It doesn't mean they haven't tried. Trust me, they try. But when the attorney, the forensic accountant, the financial professional goes and looks, especially at things like bank statements, but we can see they took money out in large amounts every month. They're taking money out and it's going to a bank account that we don't know about. Or they took a lot of trips to the Bahamas where there happened to be a lot of offshore banks and accounts. What happened on those trips? We might want to ask some interrogatories about those trips, asking about international bank accounts. There's a variety of different things that people can do. The request for production is really a critical part of all of this, right? It's one of the most important parts. It also, because it's a lot of work, can take a really long time. And here's one of the big problems with that. Everything gets stale quickly. So if it takes months to get all of the financial discovery, but they gave you the bank statements in the first month, those bank statements now need to be updated because you're 6 months out of date. Right. So I will tell you, I have an episode in the archive with Story Jones, who created something called Detour Life, which allows you to just connect your financial accounts to that software, and it will pull all the information initially and on an ongoing basis so that you don't have to go and print out and upload or send over all of your different statements. You can just upload them right into that program, and then you can update things as you go along. So go check out that episode. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. And Story had a special offer for listeners, so you can go and take advantage of that if you want to try it out. Just want to make sure you know about Detour Life. It's DTOUR.LIFE. We'll get back to the episode in just a minute, but first, a quick shout out from our sponsor, Yumi Jewelry. And coming up next, I want you to know I'll be sharing why rushing to divide assets before discovery is a major mistake, even if you think you've agreed, the real reason discovery drags on, and how you can avoid those endless delays, and how one couple's $1 million real estate dispute nearly derailed their entire divorce. So stay with me, there's a lot more to cover. Listen in on the promo first. Now, let's take a little minute to talk about something special. If you follow me on Instagram, you all know how much I love my evil eye pendant. I love I have my bracelet, I have the pendant that goes around my neck. I wear evil eyes all the time. And so many of you have reached out asking where I got them. I'm thrilled to share with you all, drum roll please, that my favorite jewelry source, Yumi Jewelry, is now a sponsor of Divorce and Beyond. For me, Yumi Jewelry is more than just jewelry. The symbols are symbols of strength, individuality, and empowerment. And they handcraft each piece with love and care. And so they are designed to help women stand out and embrace our unique personalities. So whether it's an evil eye like I have chosen for protection, a hamsa for faith, or any other meaningful symbol, their pieces offer beauty and inspiration even during these tough times like divorce. So here's the best part. Yumi is giving my listeners an exclusive discount if you use the code BEYOND, that's BEYOND, all caps, at checkout. You'll get 20% off your order. 20%. So if you're looking for a meaningful piece to keep you inspired or to protect you during this difficult time, visit divorcebeyond.com/Yumi. That's YUMIYU. And treat yourself or treat someone you love to something special. You deserve it. Now, let's get back to the second half of the show. There's also something called a request for admission, and that's the yes or no test. Is this a yes or is this a no? You ask your spouse to basically say something is true or something is false. It's like being able to ask them a true-false question that they have to respond to. So, for example, your attorney might ask your spouse to admit or deny statements like, "You received a $50,000 bonus last year." True or false? Admit or deny. "You transferred money to a secret account before filing for divorce." Admit or deny. You might take the word secret out of there. You transferred money to a separate sole account before filing for divorce. And you can ask these questions in a variety of different ways. These requests for admissions are intended and designed to narrow down the issues so you don't have to argue over things that are already a proven fact, right? So if it's proven and they've admitted it, then you know this is something that you can just put in that pie. It's a done deal. The $50,000 bonus, done, goes into the pie. They can be helpful. They're not done as commonly either. They are usually done the closer you get to trial, so you can narrow down the issues that are going to have to be done in that trial, right? So things that will need to be addressed in that trial. Okay, and then the last tool, and it's a pretty powerful one and something that people absolutely hate having to do, and that is depositions. And depositions are live testimony. It's like a mini trial, except there's no judge present. Depositions are formal, recorded interviews where your spouse or other parties who are relevant, so their business partners, their accountant, their alleged affair partner, they have to answer questions from your attorney under oath in front of a court reporter or in a way that their testimony, sworn testimony, is recorded. So you do think of it like a mini courtroom session, although again, there's no judge there. Your attorney asks the questions and a court reporter records everything. And the other person's, your spouse's attorney, is also there, and they can object just as they would in a courtroom. But remember, there's no judge there, so any objections won't be dealt with until you do get to trial. But depositions can be extremely powerful because one, you and your attorney get to see how your spouse is going to respond to questioning in real time. It's kind of a little demo of how they're going to do in court. You can start to catch inconsistencies in their version of events, of how things happened. You can ask them follow-up questions about the discovery materials, the production et al. That you've received earlier, if you have additional questions about it. And the answers in your depositions can be used later in court because they are sworn testimony. I will say depositions are especially useful in high asset divorces when we have one of those situations where one spouse controls most of the finances and the other one is in the dark. Because when one spouse does not have that background on the financial life of the family, the fastest way honestly to get many of the facts straight is to put the breadwinner or the party who handled the finances in the hot seat and just ask them the questions. So those are our tools. And again, mediation, collaborative, we don't go down that road. We don't get coercive because that's what that is. These are compelled by law to do these things. So in the more cooperative and collaborative approaches, you don't have this coercive aspect. And that means, frankly, you keep the conflict down, you keep the costs down, and things move much more quickly. But if you are in a more traditional divorce process, be ready for any or all of these maneuvers. They're a part of the process. They're going to come early in the process. Discovery is done, as I said at the top of the episode, before you get to the point of negotiating your final settlement. You might negotiate temporary things, but you're not going to negotiate your final settlement. Here's the big kicker with all of this. Discovery is very, very stressful. There is a huge emotional toll to the discovery process. And you might feel very invaded, very violated. Here you are being asked a lot of very personal questions, not just about your financial life. I promise you, those interrogatories at the deposition, you're going to get questions that you frankly don't want to be talking about in front of a room full of strangers. It's horribly embarrassing. It's horribly invasive, and it's very frustrating. The paperwork is also frustrating. Let's talk frustration. It comes in a flood. You have to pull everything together. You have to organize it. You're doing it. Your spouse isn't doing it. You can't seem to get them to give the paperwork. And most often, even when they do give you information and you do get information, there's that undercurrent of belief that your spouse is hiding something. And then it costs you more money and more time to cross every T and dot every I with those coercive tools. Because remember, every single one of those things cost you time and money. You send out interrogatories, time and money. You send out requests for production, time and money. You do depositions, lots of time and money. All of this, right? So it's infuriating for people. It can be the single most important factor in dragging a divorce out, making it expensive, and making it the most frustrating experience of your lives. So here's a little advice. Stay organized. Start a folder, be it digital or physical, and keep track of all of your documents, and have a separate folder that you do the same thing for the documents that your spouse provides and the information that they provide. And you should be going through everything your spouse provides. Your attorney, your accountants, your financial people, they know what to look for, but you know even more what is perhaps not the norm in your family. This is a great place to use that Detour Life or some other folder. Make sure you're keeping all of this information in a digitally secure place, but keep track of everything. Get a binder, go old school, but keep track. This is really important. This is also the place where if you are going full bore discovery with the coercive process, you're going to want to lean on your professionals. Get the right people involved, because in the end, that's going to save you time and money and frustration. And listen to these professionals, your attorney, your financial planner, your forensic accountant. when they tell you the cost benefit of doing different things. So all of those coercive tools, as I talked about, cost money and time and certainly a level of frustration. Sometimes you can do something, but you might not want to. It may cost you more than what you might discover. And so you need to be the person who weighs the financial cost and the emotional cost of sending out another request for a second request for interrogatories or a second request for production or having a deposition or filing another motion to compel and going to court. You need to look at what the cost benefit analysis is and always weigh that with the financial and the emotional, because you want to try to keep the emotions out of this. I know that is hard, but think of discovery as a business transaction, and the clearer and calmer you are, the better results you're going to get. Now, before I wrap up, I just want to touch on, without going deeply into this, but I do want to touch on a couple of complex issues that you might encounter in the discovery process. And these tend to come up in more high net worth divorce cases or cases involving self-employed spouses, which we see more and more. So, business ownership. If your spouse owns a business, just right off the bat, expect complications because business financials can be manipulated, and it often takes a forensic accountant to determine the real value and to find everything that needs to be found. There can also be hidden assets, another very common thing the higher up you go. So think offshore accounts, cryptocurrency, shell companies. If you suspect hidden assets, you will need a financial expert. I have a couple of excellent episodes with different financial experts about hidden assets. Notably, I have one with Tracy Cohenin, and she has fantastic tips. She is a forensic accountant, and she has a lot of great information in her episodes. We will link to her. She has 2 episodes with me. Definitely go listen to those if you think that there are going to be hidden assets. There's also in many of the higher net worth cases, but also we're seeing this more and more often in all divorces, especially as people get married later in life, we're seeing prenups and postnups. If you have a prenuptial agreement or even a postnup, discovery will focus on some of the issues around whether that was fairly executed, whether all the assets were disclosed at that time. You've added another layer of important discovery that will need to be done. Have some great episodes on prenups as well. One especially to note is with Monica Mazzi. I'll make sure to link to that one about prenups in the show notes for you. So for all these complex issues, I very much recommend, and you will discuss with your attorney, the team members to bring on, but you're likely going to be looking at a forensic accountant, perhaps business valuation experts, and sometimes even private investigators. They are especially used in cases where you have a self-employed person who gets paid under the table. So those are just some quick things to be thinking of. We can go deeper into those in some later episodes. If these are things that are of interest to you, I will bring on some private investigators. I do have one episode with a private investigator who talks a little bit about some of this. We'll link to that in the show notes as well. That's one of the good things, listeners, about having more than 300 episodes is we can give you information here, but there's always more to go get out of the archive. So, final thoughts. All right, that was, I know, a deep dive into the discovery process. But remember, discovery is all about transparency, and it's there to ensure that both parties have the financial information needed so that they can negotiate a settlement that works best for both of you and for your family. This is really important if you can both be of the mind that it's going to save time, money, effort, stress, and keep the conflict down. If you can be cooperative in this discovery process, that is going to be the number one thing that helps you get through this divorce process in a reasonable way. where you can maintain a relationship for the benefit of your family, for your children, and for your own sanity. It is one of the areas where staying organized, you cannot just throw everything into a box and go dump it on your attorney's desk. You need to be organized. That's why I love technology. That's why I suggest finding the right technology to help you with this. But be organized. Work closely with your attorney and your other professionals to provide accurate and timely responses if you are hit with discovery requests. And if your case is complex, don't hesitate to bring in the experts that you need to uncover hidden assets or analyze business finances. If after a cost-benefit analysis, you determine that's the right way to go, don't forget the cost-benefit analysis, because the worst thing in the world would be to spend $10,000 on a forensic accountant who only finds you $5,000 in hidden income. Listeners, I hope this episode makes you feel more confident and prepared for this stage of your divorce. This is really one of the most critical phases. You need to get that pie pulled together. Don't start slicing it up, no matter how tempted you might be, and work with your professionals to make the discovery process as smooth and seamless and cooperative as possible. Until next time, stay strong, stay informed, and remember, you are moving forward to a brighter beyond. Thank you for joining me today on the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I hope you found some information and inspiration to help you on this journey. Please join me every Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a new episode. And if you like the show, please take the time to subscribe and leave me a 5-star review on iTunes. You can also find more information on the website at divorceandbeyondpod.com, where you'll find links to the YouTube channel, transcripts of the episodes, and other bonus content. So I'll see you next week to help you move through your divorce and beyond.